Dear students, welcome back to a Digital Learning, an initiative by a Department of Collegiate and Technical Education, Government of Karnataka. In the previous session, we learned about the purpose of planning. So far, in this unit, we have completed there is a meaning of planning, definition of planning, nature of planning, importance of planning, and also purpose of planning. Will make a move to a next concept in this planning. That is, in this session, we're going to learn about steps in planning. So, what is the learning objective of this session is to understand the planning process. And the session outcomes is at the end of the session, the students shall have concept clarity and understanding with regard to planning process. Students, a planning process involves the setting of a business objectives and allocation of resources for achieving them. A planning determines the future course of action for utilizing various resources in the best possible way. It is a combination of information handling and decision-making system based on the information inputs, outputs, and a feedback loop. So let us start with the steps in planning process. Students, there are many models of the planning process. In that, hence we reach Harold notes presents the following model of the planning process with the different stages. And this model tends to be a future-oriented, a comprehensive, integrated, a systematic, participative, and negotiated. Now let us see what are the steps involved in a planning process. Step 1, setting objectives. Step 2, developing premises. Step 3, identification of alternative courses of action. Step 4, evaluating alternative courses. Step 5, selecting an alternative. Step 6, implement the plan. And final step, that is step 7, a follow-up action. Dear students, let us learn one by one in detail. The first one, setting objectives. The first step in a planning process is the awareness of the external business opportunities as well as to fix the objective. Here, the planning process is to establish objectives for the entire organization as well as for the various departments on a long-term and short-term basis. It is essential that the objectives should be properly formulated considering where we want to be and what we want to accomplish and when. So objectives specify that expected and end results and all energies are directed to achieve these end results through a network of action of plans. So it means here, so in this step 1, the planning helps that where we want to be and what we want to accomplish and when we want to achieve that results. So setting objectives is the first function in the process of planning. Let us go to a next step, developing premises. The second step involves that a developing assumption on which a planning process will be based. So by planning premises, we mean assumptions about the environment. It involves identification of critical environmental factors such as economic, social, political, technological, etc. It means in any organization, plans are to be formulated based on a certain assumptions. The planning the premises are the assumption about the future conditions and events like trends in a population, changes in a political and economic environment, changes in a production costs and prices, government, and the legal regulations, etc. So it is necessary to forecast the behavior of these factors in the near future for constituting planning premises. So forecast will generally be made for the following: the expectations for demand for the products, the likely volume of production, the anticipation of cost, the likely price at which products will be marketed, the supply of labor, the supply of raw materials, the economic policies of the government, the changing pattern of the consumer preferences, the impact of technological changes on the production process, the sources of supply of funds, the impact of international business environment, the stability of the government. So, dear students, it is difficult to predict precisely and accurately the changing environmental factors and make an accurate forecast in our future. Therefore, the premises should be limited to a critical, strategically important events that have most impact on business. So next step is the identification of alternative courses of action. So once the objectives are set and assumptions are to be made, then manager can identify the alternative courses of action to achieve organization goals. There may be many ways to act and achieve the objectives. In this process, the planner should identify and develop a number of alternative courses. The students, considering the both in what environment, that is internal and external environment, will our plans operate and what are the most alternatives to accomplish our objectives. So the planner should detail out the various alternative courses of action based on the past experiences, research, and experimentation, etc. The alternatives, so developers should be weighed with the pros and cons and reduced to a minimum number that are most promising and will be fruitful. Next, step 4, that is evaluating alternative courses. This is a very, very important step under the planning process. In this step, we have to analyze the strengths and weakness of each alternative because each alternative courses of action has their own merits and demerits, limitations. So there is a need to evaluate each and every courses of action in light of objectives to achieve it. It means the students, after developing alternative courses of action, the next step is to evaluate them in terms of the contribution to accomplish organizational goals, organizational objectives. Evaluation will involve the study of performance of various courses of action as to their cost and benefits. The next step is selecting an alternative. After examining each and every possible courses of action, the student, the best one will be selected in the step in order to accomplish the organization goals. So we can call it as a decision making stage. So selecting an alternative is called decision making stage. The ideal course of action must be feasible, must be profitable, and with a minimum negative consequences. It means having evaluated different alternatives, the next step is that selection of one best alternative course of action. This is the point of decision making, deciding upon the plan to adopted for accomplishing the organizational objectives. So next step is implementing the plan. The step is concerned with putting the plan into action to achieve the objectives. So implementation of plan requires the formulation of policies, procedures, and programs. It also requires the cooperation, participation, and commitment of the subordinates for efficient implementation of the plan. A follow-up action, that is the final step in a planning process or steps involved in planning process. After implementation of the plan, it is necessary to see whether plans are performing the activities as per the plans adopted in our organization or not. Dear students, the manager should check whether the plan is working according to the organizational goals or not. Because the monitoring the plan is very important to ensure that objectives are achieved. So upon selecting one best course of action, the number of supportive plans are supplement. The basic plan are required to be developed and should be implemented. Then the implementation involves the establishment of policies, procedures, standards, budgets. Once you implement it, then the organization must be follow up the plans because they represent some of anticipated incomes and expenditures with a resultant profits and projected balance sheets. So that after implementation of the plan, it is necessary to see that whether the plans are performing the activities as per the plans adopted in our organization or not. So dear students, in this session, we learned about steps in planning or a process of planning. So first one, that is setting up of an objective, and next one that is assumption. The next one is identification of alternative courses of action, and then evaluating alternative courses, and finally the selecting an alternative as a decision making stage, then implement the plan, and finally follow up action. Then reference books. Thank you, my dear students, for watching the video.